Okay, so this is a video game review for Warrior Kings for the PC. This game was released in 2002 and is a very distinctive strategy game. It's a game that I always knew I'd get around to reviewing, but unfortunately is a game that, for all its great retouches, just suffers from some major deal breakers. To begin with, the loading screens have some very tastefully done and interesting art to them, which makes those few seconds waiting between missions go by quicker. The story is relatively straightforward, if a bit bland. It takes place in a reimagined late medieval Europe, where a megalomaniacal patriarch is doing his best to destroy civilization, and your father happens to be one of a few nobles foolish enough to stand up to his local henchmen, as shown at the beginning of the game, when your homeland is burnt to asunder by a bishop lackey of the patriarchs in one of the game's many dreary cinematics. Visually, they do what they can with the blocky 3D engine, but they lack voice acting, which really removes the player from the story, and is an important oversight, in my opinion. Fortunately, the game's story isn't simply another exercise in religious bashing. As playing as Artos, son of the murdered noble, you'll be helped by friendly abbots and priests to rid the empire of the tyrant patriarch. Your story will see you scarper off to Angland, aka Britain, where you raise a force and defeat the local warlord, before basically doing the same all across Europe and the Middle East in a linear fashion. There are numerous unique strategy elements to 2002 present in this game which give it a nice touch. The game reminds me a little bit of Rise of Nations, another strategy game released some years later, in the way that in each mission you can establish numerous settlements, each surrounded with farms. These in turn have to transport their food and materials that they acquire back to the central manor, which makes your supply wagons vulnerable to attack and theft if travelling far distances between villages. The upkeep system in Warrior Kings means that you'll be spending some time building up your settlement to support itself and any army that you happen to raise, but you don't get quite the same level of pride once it's established as you do from a game like Stronghold, where there are loads of different elements to your economy. Scouting areas is vital in Warrior Kings, as the range of vision in the game is seriously reduced, even across flat terrain, which means that enemies can be upon you within seconds, and with perhaps numerous settlements spread across long distances, this can be hard to defend against, even if it's perhaps a more realistic portrayal of early history than in other strategy games. The 3D graphics in Warrior Kings are blocky and not the nicest to look at, but they're not what hold the game back. The landscapes are usually interesting, and water and hills slow units down as they should, and do provide tactical advantages for archers, who do greater damage upon hilltops. Spearmen really do fight better against cavalry. Cavalry are better against archers, so the unit balance is as it should be. Different fertility land is a nice touch, so depending on where you place your farms, you bring in different yields, and having both male and female workers is a nice touch at a time when most games didn't do this. The quips from the workers that you have are by no means as well done or as light-hearted, quite as funny as the ones that you may hear in the Warcraft or Stronghold games, but they're far more enjoyable to listen to than the responses you hear from your cavalry units in Warrior Kings, which are grating to say the least. There are plenty of missions in the main campaign to keep you busy, but no skirmish mode, which is a clearly missed opportunity. Given that the story isn't riveting, and you may well find that you tire of it within a few minutes, this is a shame. During the campaign, the player will have the opportunity to travel down 3 different paths. You have your bog standard good, evil, and neutral. Here they're called Imperial, Pagan, and Renaissance. At least that's what I've heard. Unfortunately, when I had this game, I never really had the manual to explain all these differences and how certain things came about, so the differences were somewhat lost on me. I could tell what my enemy was, whether it was Imperial, Pagan, or Renaissance, and I could tell that during the missions there were certain events which would lead you towards one side or another. What I didn't get, though, is how that when I played it the first time, and I ended up going down the Renaissance route, the neutral route, and then the second time I played this, trying to end up with one of the other routes, I still went down the Renaissance route, so that was a bit irritating. I couldn't really work out what was going on. I think the implementation of it could have been better and more transparent as to what was going on. They have this church system of prayers and special intercessions, which I never really understood all that well. So you may see scenes in other videos about this game where you see these great big creatures and beasts and stuff. I never really saw this except in my enemy kind of creating these great big demons and stuff later on in the game. I was never able to create anything like that, so I think that was partly because I was playing as Renaissance. But again, these were things that were somewhat improved in the sequel, but here I didn't feel it was quite done well enough. And the reason I think that is partly because they didn't integrate, the developers, Black Cactus, didn't integrate a tutorial into the first few missions. Now, most of us don't need tutorials to just get stuck into a game, but I feel that this game could have moved into the realms of its story a lot more easily if they had integrated one. I feel that the first missions aren't introduced well enough, partly due to the fact that there's no voice acting, no effective cutscenes, but the fact they just kind of throw the player in. And the problem is that I think the difficulty curve is actually very badly done at the beginning of this game. There was, I think it was either the third or fourth mission, which I just was completely stumped on. You're playing as this disguised monk, is your character Arst, and he has to find a way into an enemy castle, but there's so many guards around and so much fog that I found it literally impossible to complete this mission without resorting to looking up cheats on the internet and proceeding in the game. And I don't think that most people should have to do that on the third mission. And it happened to me the first time I ever played this game, and it happened to me again. So I feel like I think they missed a trick on that one. I think after that I was just not willing to enjoy this game, even though I sat through hours and hours of playing it. I feel the difficulty curve was just not in keeping with the stage that I was at in the game. The later missions, in fact, are a bit easier. Well, in fact, they're a lot easier because they're not impossible, but they're quite dreary still. And after the first few, you're likely just to forget the whole point of the story because the missions just drag on for hours. Now, this is because the game speed is just excruciatingly slow, with no option to speed the game up. Instant gratification this game is not. I even found the unit animations skipping between moving from spot to spot sometimes as well, so it was just another aspect of the game that just kind of smacked of being unfinished. Playing this game the second time round did not give me nostalgia. I stopped earlier than I did before. As a game, it isn't horrifically bad. It's just about playable, and perhaps towards the end of the game the missions become something just amazingly great, but I kind of I didn't ever reach that stage. It really wasn't engaging for me, and the score I give it, I do in full knowledge that its sequel is a vast improvement upon it. I'm not taking back any of the compliments I gave to it. In fact, in some areas it shows some real originality, and is one of the reasons why I bought the sequel, because I saw enough in this game to give it another chance, if you want to put it like that. I didn't enjoy playing Warrior Kings, that's for sure. There was one game mode, and it was implemented poorly, and could have just made more of the game engine, which I felt was actually better than the story and all the things, the trappings around it, than they actually did, the Black Cactus, the developers. It's a game that seems just a little bit confused about what it wants to be, and it's just let down by some basic gaming errors, like not including a game speed, not having voice acted cutscenes, so the story doesn't resonate with the player, not having a skirmish mode, not having compelling music. The music is just really strange, just like the game feels a bit confused. The sound effects as well, just you want to unplug your speakers when you hear some of them because they're just really grating, like some of the unit responses. So in conclusion, I give Warrior Kings a 4 out of 10. And that's me.